Hello, everyone. Welcome back to SemiAnalysis Weekly. I'm here this week with the Data Center, Energy, and Industrials team. That's Jeremy, Ellie, and Rake. We're going to talk about a couple of articles they put out recently. The first is Stop Saying Half of 2026 US Data Center Capacity is Canceled. Nice title. We'll clarify some stuff there. And the second one,
Title.
yeah, pretty descriptive, yeah. And the second one is about behind the meter data center power generation. 40 gigawatts by 2028. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks, bro.
Thank you,
Good to see you
Jordan.
again.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
We're covering 3 continents on this one. We got Rake in Singapore,
The
me in Europe.
latency.
We'll try
So I
not to
never
talk
said some
to each other.
semi-analysis, bro.
Normal day, yeah. Okay, so let's dig in. The first article had a great title, and obviously the conclusion didn't bury the lead at all. But I've been seeing this all over the media where everybody keeps saying that half of data center capacity is canceled. You guys walk through maybe reasons why people are saying this, and then clarified some stuff as to like what's actually happening. Can you give a lay of the land as to what's reality, what's fake?
Yeah. I can start with the why. uh, I think Bloomberg started this, right, with this big headline of like half of US data center capacity is delayed. Everyone else started piling in and citing the same number. And, most of these articles point to the same underlying source, right, which is a report that's available out there. And, when you look at the report says there was 12 gigawatt of data center capacity scheduled to go online in the US in 2026, and only 5 is under construction. Right. And I think, for us, when we saw this, we're like, bro, why is everyone talking about this? Like, it's just not possible. And I think that the funny thing is that, like, you don't even need to like do anything fancy. You can just disprove this data so easily. Like, I don't know, man. Amazon announced publicly they built 4 gigawatts in 2025. Is that going up or not in 2026? Obviously, it's going up. Amazon alone is probably gonna add like 5 gigawatt plus. So that's basically all they think is gonna be going live, like one company. Obviously you had all of the hyperscalers. CoreWeave, is gonna add a gigawatt in 2026. All of that is under construction. So you're telling me CoreWeave's 1 gigawatt under construction is like, a fifth of the market? Like, come on. There's a massive issue in the denominator. Like, you're just wrong. Just publish that. So, yeah, that's the high level take, right? If you want to add more deets. But for me, I think that was the trigger. It's just looking at the underlying source. You're like, oh, guys, you're just off. It's just wrong.
Yeah, we had seen this getting like paraded around quite a bit, and I mean, like everybody would go viral, just kind of reposting it. It was like, my God, this is mind numbing to see every time on my Twitter timeline. And obviously, like our clients are pretty smart. Our clients are going to take every like data source they can and compare them against each other. So we also had to help every client on that front. And it was like, well, why don't we just write a newsletter about this and say like, yo, this is just really fake. We don't have to really go into this as much anymore. Please just read the newsletter. A lot of the kind of baseline here is not worth really talking about sometimes. Yeah, so that's why we ended up writing it.
Yeah. And in addition to that, like, it's not even like the spirit of the article was fake in a sense. Like, you can imagine or you can forgive somebody getting the exact numbers wrong. But if I look at this chart that you guys put out around how the outlook that you guys have forecasted from roughly the last year, like April of last year to May of this year, it hasn't even changed by 5%. I'll put this chart up on screen. So maybe you can talk through a little bit about like what the reality of some of these forecasts are, which is that some stuff gets, delayed, but there's very few cancellations that are actually showing up in the market, right?
Well, I would disagree. I think there's a pretty substantial amount of cancellations Just what we keep saying is that these cancellations are early stage projects, right?
Okay.
I'm not sure if you have this one on the screen, but like there's this map of the US where we show like the large load requests, right? Which is like slightly different, but kind of goes to the same point. As of today, you have over a terawatt of data center load that is requested by operators in the US alone, right? This chart is as of 6 months ago. It's more than doubled now. So we have over a terawatt. Obviously, the whole US system right now, peak load 750 gigawatts. You're not gonna, double it right now in sort of, just a couple years. It's just not possible. It's not a reality. So obviously, this is fake. There's a lot of early stage projects, and it makes sense. Essentially, I think the data center market started booming towards the end of 2023. That's when early folks started to realize, hey, there's going to be a big constraint on this. The first big deal started to get signed at that moment, and since then there's been this massive search for power, and that means that everyone was trying to find where is power available, and that leads to some behaviors where, because everyone is doing it, then if you want to be successful, you also yourself have to be aggressive and plan multiple options. And that is actually nothing new. Like hyperscalers have always had multiple options when evaluating projects. It's even more critical in times of constraint. And so you would see sometimes for one final investment decision, see hyperscalers maybe have 10 different options, right? And so that would be 10 projects where they sort of talk to the local counties. They talk to like the utilities and so on and so forth. And these are not all realistic, and they're sort of just testing the field and be like, okay, which county can enable me to build my large scale project? Where do I have the workforce? Where do I have the supply chains? Where can I build it? So, anyways, there's an oversupply of very early stage projects. And our point, and that was sort of Rake's brilliant phrasing, the cloud coded projects, is that I just love this. This is amazing. Is that as a kind of start AI is, I guess, not very good at filtering, right? So when you have humans in the loop, yes, it's pretty obvious that some of these announcements are way too aggressive. We gave a bunch of examples in the article of, folks where, they announce a 10 gigawatt project. They say the first tranche of 500 megs is going to be available next year. And then you click on the website, you see contact us, nothing more. And then you start digging into whatever permits and whatnot, you see nothing. So at some point you're just like, okay, these people probably have a lot of land in Texas or something like that, but they don't yet have a real project, right? Any human judgment would sort of filter that, but I guess for AI, it's still pretty hard these days. So if you want to build a forecast of the industry, you have to base it on realistic forecasts, or SemiAnalysis. Extensive triangulation has always been our playbook, not just data centers, but also chips, because obviously this has downstream implications on NVIDIA, upstream on the AI labs, their revenue, all of that stuff connects to each other. That's, the semi-analysis flywheel covering every single one of these industries and building a cohesive view. Others don't do that and easily, struggle to find the
Yeah,
ability to criticize outputs.
makes sense. So in the article, you guys cover three different types of data center delays. One, the aggressive announcement by a newer data center developer. Two, an advanced project with overly optimistic construction timelines. That might just be a delay or a pushed out or something. And then the third one is really something facing permitting and local opposition issues. So, Ellie, can you come in here and maybe explain one of those examples where we do look in and find something in permits?
Yeah, sure. So the project which is facing quite a lot of pushback locally, not just New Mexico local opposition, but also from jurisdictional and regulatory kind of characters. There is a project Jupiter, Oracle's project Jupiter, in New Mexico. So yeah, but essentially they're trying to construct a pipeline to feed the behind the meter data center in Doña Ana province, and essentially the this pipeline hasn't been built, and the route that they are planning to that they want to build on is hasn't been approved. They haven't got an approved route. They haven't got a secondary approved route. And essentially the whole all of the ways to kind of get gas to the site don't seem very feasible. So looking at there's a pipeline issue for which they're trying to make happen, but there seem every FERC filing that I see that comes through on the docket, they haven't made much progress or any progress at all, because essentially it's defaulted to a type of regulatory process which essentially there is no precedent for it being done sooner than essentially 2 years, and given the local opposition as well, it's very unlikely that it'll be sped up. There are other options to getting gas to the site, like you could ship truck CNG and LNG to a facility, as we point out. However, this at scale, getting to that's I think the only proven delivery of CNG at scale is kind of around 200 megawatts, or like max 200 megawatts. I think maybe even that's optimistic. And there aren't many producers in the local area, and there are not enough trucks to facilitate that. So essentially, yeah, there's not only a pipeline which doesn't exist and has no viable route of existing, but getting gas to the site via CNG and LNG is even harder. Is just not viable. So yeah, no, it just, I think it demonstrates kind of an interesting bottleneck which could occur with more behind the meter facilities, is like building gas pipeline infrastructure, especially in territories like New Mexico. That's quite not extremely it's not an extremely friendly area towards that kind of infrastructure. But yeah, I would that's how we basically look through the filings. We look through all of the filings. We already had it on our radar because they had issues with the initial turbines that they were trying to use at the site, so they ended up switching to Bloom fuel cells. And through kind of that research, I spotted this timeline, and I was just like, this doesn't make sense. Why are there so many local all this pushback, all these local comments, and then FERC and the other regulators are still thinking about it.
So is this an example of a Claude-coded data center project?
So I think what this speaks to is rather that there's we have to rethink the way we build data centers in order to meet this demand. But it's not like other people had built 1 gigawatt sites before this, right? Like we're still in the early innings of bringing the first gigawatt scale data centers to market. So we had to try a whole lot of different things. No one has experience doing this. Maybe today, yes, but like as of 1 year ago, 2 years ago, no one had experience. So obviously, you try all these new things, there's going to be errors. So that's why it's, the way we analyze big projects like this, we always try to think of what is a reasonable timeline. I think it's pretty, it's pretty common in the industry that you have folks that pitch more aggressive timelines, but I think it happens, and that's valid for every single industry. It's not data centers, contractors. I think anyone that has a construction would tell you they tend to be always over optimistic. Suppliers are always over optimistic. It's not like this is anything new, and especially when you try something much bigger at that scale with new designs and so on and so forth in new locations, new counties, new municipalities handling it, then obviously you're going to face a few challenges. So that's a great fit for a category of projects that are already well advanced because they already got financing. They got it for release from Oracle, OpenAI, but Oracle charged to OpenAI. So there's already a massive contract on this, but facing execution challenges now.
Yeah, makes sense. Maybe we could talk about behind the meter now. So you guys in the second article published some numbers on this. The first y-axis on one of your charts in a little while there, Jeremy, which is pretty cool. So when we talk about the size and scale of some of these projects, I guess the behind the meter net additions when compared to like the available grid capacity is a significant difference. And you specifically forecasted over 40 gigawatts of net additions of data center capacity behind the meter by 2028. That number is effectively like it rounds to zero right now, right? Like there's a few behind the meter projects, but people are just getting going, ordering turbines, the supply chain's ramping up. what does it actually take to get there? And do you expect that behind the meter projects are more at risk of cancellation based on some of the reasons Ellie just described, or less at risk of cancellation because they don't depend on the grid?
Excellent question, man. Excellent question. So I guess the first thing is, okay, this forecast sort of depicts our analysis mostly of the U.S. grid, right, and looking at the gap. Context, we're not adding enough generation on the grid to meet that demand that is gonna be in the tens of gigawatts per year and just keeps increasing every single year based on all of the signals that we keep seeing, right? So now, is it realistic to assume there's going to be 40 gigawatts of new behind-the-meter data centers added by 2028? You have to look at what is being planned right now. I can tell you in the last 2 weeks, 3 gigawatts of data center deals were signed for behind-the-meter purposes, right? So deals are happening. Site selection, I think, happened beforehand. I think you saw a massive move in part of 24, mostly 25, where folks really started to have like access to a gas pipeline as one of the main site selection criteria. I think you started seeing sort of diversions where maybe some of the traditional data center operators were more focused on, let's be in a tier 1 market like Northern Virginia, let's find grid connected sites because we need the 5 nines. And you saw sort of more newer operators, maybe more, AI builds that sort of try to foresee this trend. I think Crusoe is a great example. They've been quite ahead of the curve on this, and they've been able to, sign massive deals like Abilene's 672 megawatts with Microsoft announced publicly by Crusoe in Q1 that, that's behind the meter, for example.
Yeah.
Anyways, I think we're getting there in terms of, is the supply ready for it? Because there's like many developers that have secured sites. In terms of manufacturers, Ellie, I think I can probably do an extremely detailed rundown. In terms of probability of delays, I think the probability of delays is lower with behind the meter because of the way these grid constraints play out. Is that as a developer, you talk to utility, they have no binding obligation to abide by the schedule that they provided you. And what keeps happening time and time again is, with the anecdotes we hear from developers, say, I thought I was going to get 500 megawatts by, 2027. I had a handshake with the utility or whatever. And then, a couple of months later, they tell me, actually, sorry, bro, I can't do it. It's going to be, 100 by 2028. You're 500 by 2032 because I got to do bigger network upgrades because, hey, actually, I didn't consider my analysis. This other guy also wants it. You don't have enough generation coming and so on and so forth. And so, yeah, I think utilities are sort of realizing they're faced with more delays than they thought. And so in many cases, if your strategy is only grid, you're extremely likely to be disappointed. If anything, that's more so on the power side. Behind the meter, I guess, adds a new risk, which is more the execution layer. Like, can you build a power plant on time? Can you get the permitting? That adds a new set of complexities. We're going to see some high-profile delays. Obviously, the New Mexico one, based on our analysis, is the highest of profiles, right? Basically, $100 billion deal for OpenAI with Oracle. So the highest type of delays that you can have. Hope they're going to solve it on time. Wish them the best. I think you're going to see more of that, but I think in terms of raw volumes, because there's like so many options now for developers, you're going to see a lot of success stories as well. And Colossus 1 and 2 are proof that you can do this at scale. Now, I don't know if they're the best examples because of the issues they have with regards to permitting, but they're demonstrating that it can be done, and there's others doing it. Crusoe is another example.
I was just going to add to that, like we're seeing the OEMs really reacting to the behind the meter story as well. So, we're seeing obviously the major OEMs, the established players like, your Siemens, GE, all those guys expanding manufacturing capacity. But then throughout the stack, you're seeing new players, new entrants, new types of technology, and then recycled old types of technology, which we've written about in several different notes. But yeah, I think that's a really like increasing that's a good tell for how this market and is developing at the speed, and also I think on the permitting thing, that's something which could delay data centers, we've seen, companies switch to Bloom fuel cells in order to kind of get speed to, well, possibly speed to power because of manufacturing footprint of Bloom fuel cells, but also it's lower NOx and SOx emissions. So so they're and I think that was the Nubius, New Jersey facility, for example, is they switched to Bloom. I think it was Bergen turbines prior. So in order to combat the permitting issues there. So we might see, shifting around of technology, maybe relocating to other states like to Texas rather than on the East Coast. But no, that's that would be kind of the story going on in the BTM market right now. Full growth.
Makes sense. Yeah. Jeremy, maybe we could go back to one thing you said related to the like size of some of this. So at this point, when you say that you signed, you know about 3 gigawatts signed in the last week, and we're talking about in the context of the article, 40 gigawatts of behind the meter power generation by 2028. Can you just high level for the general audience that listens to this podcast, describe a rough timeline for when something gets signed versus when construction starts versus when you can power the first tranche of GPUs on versus when a large site like a gigawatt scale site might actually be completed? Is 3 gigawatts signed in mid 2026 actually going to have anything by 2028? Is it a 2029, 2030 story? Like, is this year and a half, 2.5 years, 3, 4, 5?
Yeah, I would say it varies a lot depending on what actually is signed. There's a bunch of deals out there. The bulk of the volumes these days would be turnkey leases, where let's say a company like a Digital Realty QTS built a data center for Microsoft. They sign a firm lease, turnkey lease, where sort of QTS takes on everything and Microsoft just rents. You have power shells, which are a bit different, which is sort of a lower lower bound on the developer and sort of more capex from the tenant. You have just power deals, right, where it's basically a PPA, let's say Oracle with VoltaGrid in the Chaco 4 County, Texas site. Essentially a PPA, there's no data center involved, right? So depending on the deal, the timelines can vary. Rule of thumb would be, say, deal signed 18 months, you have capacity, but you have the first tranche. And then depending on how fast you sort of can build it. But I think it's pretty clear that these days the expectation is that the ramp from sort of first capacity, first phase to full ramp is expected to be, faster and faster. And the point we make in that article is that from a buyer's perspective, behind the meter is now becoming much more attractive than grid because you're in control of your destiny. Right? Like, hey, you're going to have gigawatts by X amount of time. Now, obviously, it has to be permitted and so on and so forth. But at least from a power standpoint, you know exactly what you're going to have on site and when, provided that there's delays from the suppliers and so on and so forth. So the idea is, hey, if you have all of this power, then you also need to build a data center because otherwise it's useless. Right? So the expectation is that the ramping up these 3 gigawatts is not going to take 5 years. It's going to be much faster than this, right? And generally, what you observe on the marketplace is that when there's a gigawatt scale deal being signed, let's say, Oracle with Stack in New Mexico, with Vantage in Texas, you see that financing for the whole project takes place shortly after, right? We saw Digital Bridge raise money for Vantage just maybe a month after the lease was signed, and we're talking about $25 billion of financing. So the money's already secured, right? Once you have that deal, you secure all the money, and then you just try to build as fast as possible. It's not going to take 5 years; it's going to be much older than that.
Yeah, so not 1, not 5, somewhere in between. Makes sense.
Yeah, by the model.
By the model, indeed. Yeah, everybody listening, by the model. Okay, I want to show you guys one chart and get your reaction here because I thought this one was fascinating in terms of understanding the market share. I think a lot of the people who buy the model are using the data that you guys provide in order to make decisions for companies on the legend here. AWS in orange, Google in blue, Meta in this fuchsia pink color, let's call it, and then Microsoft in green. So these are the hyperscalers. They make up a large percentage of the market in terms of how many megawatts they have under construction. The market share that these guys represent going forward is, I don't know, just really interesting as we see them kind of compete with each other. So I don't know, Rake, what's your take on the relationship between the hyperscalers competing with each other, and then maybe hyperscalers versus everyone else in the market in terms of just how big everybody's going right now?
In terms of competing with each other, well, I mean, I think when we take a look at kind of the capacity race, you're going to notice that it's mostly driven by the respective AI labs. So most of the time, like an AWS capacity build out will be kind of fueled by Anthropic, right? Or Meta will typically be for MSL. Microsoft, typically OpenAI as well. We know that there's some Anthropic deals going on there as well, but by the model. In any case, these are going to be in any case, these are going to be, yeah, like the drivers of the data center build out right now, right? Because they're the ones who have the capital able to actually build out the data center capacity that's needed for the AI labs. They're the ones who have the kind of investment grade financing able to start these projects and get them going forward. Most projects struggle with, actually getting the financing. Like if you're a neocloud, which if you're listening to this later on, maybe you already have read the other article. But if you're a neocloud, it's a bit hard to get the financing to start and go ahead and like get a data center and go ahead and buy the GPUs and expend the capital for all of this like build out, right? Because it's going to come out to probably billions of dollars. So in essence, you're mainly left with hyperscalers driving the AI build out, or it's going to be very, very well funded or well capitalized neoclouds. Like if we look at any of the kind of Blackstone backed guys, any of the KKR backed guys, they've got plenty of money coming in from them to support their own build out. But in any case, I forgot your second question, actually. So if you could say that again.
No problem. Yeah, it was interesting. Maybe let me ask a different one, because I'm thinking of it now listening to you talk. So at the very beginning of this article, we were commenting on the public research that has driven all of these articles in the media about how half of 2026 US data center capacity is canceled. But that chart that I put on screen and roughly what you're saying about the hyperscalers building for the AI labs says that, even if you just take 2 of those 4 hyperscalers, we've got more than 5 gigawatts under construction. And then there's the whole rest of the market, the other 2 hyperscalers, and then everybody else. So can you opine on where the gap is in terms of people trying to do research on data center capacity under construction and just missing entire gigawatts worth of capacity that's a real thing for next year?
Yeah. Luckily, Jeremy was able to explain the whole article in 3 minutes earlier, so I can kind of expand on what he said. He's a bit too efficient with his communication. Basically, when you have a model like ours, we do everything kind of in a bottoms-up way, right? Where we have like each individual data center is like, for example, a row in an Excel file for us, right? And so you can kind of get the forecast for each individual building, the tenant, if the end user is an OpenAI or an Anthropic, you already have that information for that building in specific. Then you can go ahead and find the timeline for the building, right? A lot of people don't have the expertise to judge timelines on these things, right? When we go ahead and do our data center research, I like to joke that Jeremy and I have probably seen over 10 to 20,000 satellite images, right? So not a lot of people can say that they understand like what that single gray pixel on a brown floor means. It's like, oh, that's actually the concrete padding coming in. That's going to be a good sign. Hopefully we see vertical construction, which is the darker gray pixel in the corner over there that most people wouldn't get. So the satellite images are super useful for us, but like that's just one that's really fun to talk about. The other stuff is a bit more boring, which is where we go through every kind of permit portal for every county, city, state, country in the world, right? We like to talk about how much we use Claude. as you see in the article, 170K in a week. The cloud part, everybody loves the cloud part. Anyway, so we got, our lovely chart on the kind of front of the page where it's, hey, $170,000 spent in a week, right? We're token maxing, we're token mogging Meta, or whatever you want to call it. More tokens per employee than, Meta is one of the, but in any case, we tend to use Claude. We've actually built out basically an entire harness and workflow for our agents. We love our agents that go ahead and scan and scrape every permit portal basically around the world down to state, municipality, and city and county level. And with this, we get a ton of public filing information that allows us to basically estimate timelines with that. And without going into too much more detail, that's one part of basically 3 in our methodology. And for the other 3, you can also buy the model to figure that out.
Yeah. And so, Rick,
yeah.
I put the Claude Code spend chart on screen here. So we've got, to be clear to describe this, the color coding is a per user breakdown, I believe.
Yes.
And
Yes.
people who are looking can see the really big yellow block at the bottom.
Yeah.
Which,
90% sure.
yeah, the culprit may be on this. The culprit is on the phone right now. Yeah.
That's Jeremy just melting Anthropic's GPUs at the bottom there.
Yeah. The ones that he's looking at from the sky are also cooking up some of his requests there.
Yeah, exactly. They saw Jeremy's spend and they went and bought out the SpaceX capacity right after. So thanks to him.
Good forecast.
Yeah, we're moving markets now like that. All right, go ahead.
Elliot, what you thinking about over there?
No, I was just gonna make a joke about Jeremy's usage and making Anthropic good with Pope. That was So interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how much of these how much is going to be built behind the meter from the main AI labs as well. Seeing. And I think also the kind of very behind the meter that's one term. There are kind of various different kind of definitions of kind of moving kind of energy on site and not taking all of it from the grid. I mean, you can co-locate your energy. You can have a net metering kind of solution, which is more of a kind of interactive relationship with the grid. You can have fully islanded off-grid energy supply for your data center. But I think that's going to be the kind of thing that that is going to be interesting to observe in the future as the more of them are built, seeing what's preferred. I mean, which state, fully islanded, bit of grid connection, maybe that might hedge some interconnection in the future. Also, then there's what happens to these assets, these turbines, once maybe they do connect to the grid, they might end up being part of the grid themselves. So like a lot of these turbines could be used as peakers, gas peakers, and help with solving the actual like lack of power on the grid itself. I mean, obviously there's transmission to sort out, but so I think it's more symbiotic than is kind of portrayed by a lot of other outlets. I think it's more of it's not. I don't think it's one or the other. It will be I don't think it'll be one or the other forever.
Makes sense. Yeah. Well, let me throw this chart on screen that I thought was really awesome from the second article about behind the meter power generation, kind of based on what you're talking about. This here's a breakdown of the supply ceiling by OEM per year. So we can see that increase as some of these suppliers that would be responsible for the power generation in behind the meter gas settings and how much capacity they're increasing in terms of how much they can produce. And I mean, 2 things jump to mind when I look at this. First of all, is just how much it's increasing. So it seems to be going up at roughly the rate at which we're going to increase the power generation requirement. That's a good thing. And then the second thing is just how many different suppliers there are available. We look at stuff that's a constraint in the market, whether this is like GPUs or wafers or memory or anything else. Generally speaking, when something's a constraint, it depends on like 1, 2, 3 suppliers. But when you have this diversity where the top 8 that are on screen and color coded make up just more than half, let's say, but then your footnote at the bottom of this chart shows like 25 more names that can possibly produce power. I mean, we've talked about this previously, but maybe you guys can walk through like just how diverse the options are available for power generation is, and what sort of shared supply chain there is that benefits people who are looking for alternatives when they need power and they're not sure where to get it for behind the meter.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, as I was saying, like there would be kind of established players who have like a large supply chain where, you know, and they've been in the business for years and years and years. They have manufacturing capacity globally. They have quite a they quite often say in earnings that, you know, the bottlenecks are kind of the castings, the bottlenecks are the blades, for whatever kind of turbine or aero derivative or recip kind of whatever solution they're offering. But it seems that like this is not slowing anything down, because they're still announcing capacity increases, and they're still saying that these capacity increases are driven by AI demand growth. So it seems to be actually a little bit of a narrative talking about the constraints to castings and kind of upstream constraints to building these turbines, as a bit of a narrative from last year. I think this year it's now the large OEMs are sort of like realizing that actually many more players are coming to the market, and they're trying to keep their market share, not lose it. I think that literally that was in a Siemens pre-close call this morning or yesterday. So they're very much kind of aware of this growing market, and that, you know, they can't kind of play the scarcity game and try and get everyone to freak out, because people did not freak out, but people saw an opportunity and are converting, you know, old parts of, you know, plane technology into kind of into engines, and then you know, boilers, and then obviously there's a kind of there's the auto derivative kind of options as well. So we're seeing all of these different types come into the market, some with kind of more that have more of an advantage in terms of permitting, and some less. I think there's also something which I've been noticing is more of the car industry kind of having a larger play playing a larger role in the data center industry, in the sense that like EVs are not as, I mean, they're quite popular in, you know, California and the East Coast, but like in lots of the US, there's kind of EV growth has been quite slow, and so a lot of that manufacturing capacity, I think, is going towards, well, we have the Tesla as a good one, and then we saw, and then Ford as well, providing BESS, so battery storage, battery energy storage solutions to the data center industry as well. So we're seeing kind of these existing players switch to the data center industry as well. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. But
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, makes sense. Jeremy, what's jumping to mind here when you're hearing us talk about all the different suppliers that you can use for behind the meter power generation?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it was always to be expected. Last year, the narrative was behind the meter is not possible because there's these free manufacturers that are so slow, and, you know, everyone was sort of throwing that chart, the famous chart of like, you know, how much gas orders there were in like the early 2000s, where you had this massive sort of, you know, wave, and everyone was saying GEV and Siemens are so scarred of this era because they invested massively in capacity, and so they're going to be very conservative, right? But, you know, that leaves a market opportunity. And one question we like to ask management teams at these power companies is, you know, how AI pilled are you, essentially? You know, how much do you believe? How much risk are you willing to take? There's also a function of how easy is it for you to take risk, in the sense that, you know, what's your economics on building more capacity in new factories? And there's a bunch of companies that, you know, score very well. The one that we've been flagging for a while. We especially doubled down like at the end of 25 when we did our big deep dive with Blue Energy, because I think clearly the management team is very AI pilled. I think they have economics that sort of enable them to build capacity faster than others. And the behind the meter conversation is really interesting because I think it's like, company by company, just sort of adjusting their mindsets as they adapt to the new reality. And also sort of solution by solution, you keep adjusting your expectation just based on the constraints. So what I'm saying is that initially everyone was like, okay, this is going to be bridge power. It's going to be a matter of like 1-2 years. I run off grid, and then I'm going to have my my grid come in, and maybe it's going to be backup. And so you would only consider like systems that are good at backup. Um, but that's the ultimate disadvantage for something like Bloom, is that it's like not very good at backup. It has to be run extremely hot. I think it's 15,000 degrees Celsius. Takes like 2 days, as far as I know, to go from 0 to 100. So for backup, it's really not a good system. But hey, if you have no other alternative, then maybe it's that maybe you just have to go for it, right? Like if your option is your other option is that I'm not gonna have power, then you're screwed. You're not gonna be competitive in the marketplace. Um, and other issues are like power costs. And I think when you look at the recent like SpaceX deals, I think it's pretty clear that sort of the revenue per megawatt that folks are making on the cloud side, also on the lab side, on the model side, like revenue per megawatt go up at every layer, I guess. And as that increases, it means that power costs are increasingly irrelevant. And power costs for solutions like Bloom are not that expensive anyways. With regards to what we have in Europe, for example, with the grid.
Well, certainly
But
not
yeah,
as a percentage of the total construction costs of the project, or when you
exactly.
consider the GPUs and stuff. People can pay double for the turbines they want compared to, I don't know, somebody else that's competing in the market for them, and not really affect the total CapEx of the project,
Yeah.
right?
And the other thing is like also estimating the bit of materials, I think, has proven quite complicated for many of these vendors, especially as labor rates are going to the moon. And you thought you were going to have local labor, but hey, actually, everyone in Texas is, already occupied building data centers. So you have to call people from Denver or, from Ohio. And obviously, it's much more expensive. Um, and this means that this also favors solutions that are fast to install, fast to deploy, because your BOM is sort of more predictable. Your timelines are more predictable, and both on the labor side and on the sort of full deployment side. So, I think, again, like analyzing timelines and ease of deployment is key, and I think some solutions score extremely well. And I also think we're going to keep seeing more and more new entrants because, everyone looks for capacity earlier, and the standards are sort of dropping, right? There's a few new companies that entered recently that are basically coming from the automotive industry, not themselves, like they're source engines from the automotive industry. And then when you think of this, you're like, wow, automotive, like, we're talking about like 100 gigawatt plus per year of production. And that's an industry everyone knows runs at very low utilization rates, 50%, 40%. These factors are not doing too well. Um, so the capacity and the incentive that these guys have to sell their engines to the data center market is also tremendously high.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
that unlocks gigantic capacity.
absolutely. At a minimum, it's diversification for their business. So the one thing that we haven't talked about necessarily yet is alternatives to gas, let's say. I'm sure a lot of people who are new to this space who are listening are thinking in their mind about, what about renewables? What about solar, wind, hydro, nuclear? Like, who's considering that? What's going on? So I'll throw two charts on the screen, and then hopefully you guys can comment just on the reality of being able to use um, renewables plus batteries, or um, any renewables, let's say. So
Yeah.
yeah, go for it.
So, yeah, this is grid connected. Um, so the point of this, obviously, like nameplate additions are overall growing, and we're talking about 60 gigawatts, 50 gigawatts per year. So it's a lot. But as everyone knows, the 600 gigawatt of solar is not a true gigawatt for the grid because it's intermittent and only turns on at certain hours and so on and so forth, right? pretty simple. So, depends on the area. As you see an ELCC value, so adjusted for the actual capacity value it brings to the grid. Depending on the area, it can be like 10% of it, 20% of it, sometimes below 10, sometimes over 20. Depends on, it's all sort of very complex system level calculation. The problem is that, again, like the grid is also sort of facing a lot of these transmission issues. It's intrinsically slow. There's giant interconnection queues. So I think the real question for solar and batteries is, can you do it behind the meter? Like, can people build these things on site? I think it's gonna happen, and we're gonna have much more content on that published on our website, so stay tuned. Uh, Obviously, the high level challenge is that the the land required to build like massive amount of solar is just tremendous. So logistically, these projects are fairly complex. If you're talking about, hey, I need 20,000 acres just to throw solar panels at it, it's going to be for a gigawatt data center or something like that. Then buying all that land can get complicated. Sometimes what happens, during the course of this sort of land buyout is that the landholders sort of realize, hey, this guy wants to build a $100 billion project. Maybe I'm going to sell my land 10x more expensive than what he thought I was going to get, right? So that sort of stuff happens as well. So anyways, the complexity of building these massive projects is fairly elevated, which removes the time to power angle to some extent for solar and batteries. But yeah, as folks sort of get bigger and bigger and start planning, multiple years ahead, I think there's already a lot of big projects like this underway. And the other issues, obviously, SMRs and nuclear. No, I'm not gonna reinvent the wheel. This is slow stuff, right? Everyone knows building nukes takes time. So again, not a time to power. So right now you have a lot of non-binding LOIs in the market or non-binding deals, that are contingent on like milestones and execution and getting the regulatory approvals and so on and so forth. I think in 2030s we're going to see a gigantic diversification of energy sources to power data centers. I think for the 2020s, we're going to be very much in the gas world.
Makes sense. Okay, as we move to wrap here, guys, anything left unsaid? Ellie, what you got?
I was just gonna say that we might see kind of as into the future moving on more kind of carbon. I'm starting to see more kind of carbon capture utilization storage facilities being kind of co-located with BTM sites and with data centers as well. I think that's something interesting to observe as well going forward.
To know, yeah. Break, how about you? What's jumping to mind, man?
Oh, I don't know if I have too much here. I think we covered that the listener needs to know. I'm not gonna lie. No, I don't know. I think the BTM movement is going to be very, very big. But I think maybe Jeremy touched on it already. But it's interesting to see the like what we call kind of like peak turbine in 2026, where it's like there was a huge overbuy or like a huge over purchasing of turbines in 26, where not everybody knew what to do with them. Not everybody could figure out how to get the permits, or not everybody could figure out how to build the data center to actually use the turbines. And so you ended up seeing a lot of these turbines go kind of underutilized, or later on start to hit the secondary market, for example. But I think this is going to read pretty bearish to people at first, and people might kind of freak out on it. But long term, we're still very, very pro behind the meter. I just think it'll be interesting to watch how people interpret this now, because it'll probably keep picking up, right? Like you'll probably see your favorite project's turbines start to hit the market at some point, and you're going to freak out. And then the question is it over, right? So we don't think it's over. We still quite like BTM, but I think that's going to be a fun dynamic to watch play out.
Okay, we got to end going around the horn here, Rick. What's your favorite project?
My favorite project? Actually, I might have one. I would go the N-Scale Norway project. I love this one, actually. Love this one.
Okay,
Big fan of this one.
Jeremy, what's your favorite project? Or top three? You don't have to choose.
Colossus 2, bro. Colossus 2, fast, efficient, scale, super high revenue, W.
Ellie, what's yours?
I would say the Nevius, switch to Nevius and New Jersey, so see N-Scale, right?
Why
Hey,
not
wait,
why
Rick, I
not
got a
why
question
not
for you.
Oracle, New Mexico? All right, go ahead.
I know. I don't know. Oracle, New Mexico, possibly. Maybe, yeah. I guess my favorite site. That's the one I go for.
That's a lovely. Ellie spent the most time with that one, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rick,
Jeremy,
when are we
what-
gonna get robots building data centers?
Yeah.
We
yeah,
need
yeah,
robots. We need robots building data centers. Hey, they're coming. They're coming. Hey, we should. You guys should watch the other podcast. You should watch the other podcast. We talk about this.
Give me
I
a
don't
year.
even think we did.
What year are we gonna see a data center fully
I'll
built out by
give you-
robots?
Fully built by robots. Wow. Ooh, it's a lot of man
End-to-end.
hours.
Robot electricians.
A lot of man hours. Was it like 8.5 million man hours? Dude,
Lot, man.
maybe 2029 at the earliest. 2030.
Rick's going to back calculate actuator constraints in the supply chain to be able
Yeah.
to just
I go,
determine how
let me think about how many permanent magnets are being manufactured right now. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's a tough one, man.
Yeah, the long pull. Oh man. All right. Thanks for joining. Good job.
All right.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye. Bye, Dylan.